We're going to be covering the KG M40 basic stats, as well as giving you a few meta builds for this individual weapon, because you can build it a few different ways, especially when we're talking about Vanguard weapons, because of the different damage mags. Some will speed up the fire rate and give you less damage, or give you more damage and slow down the fire rate, or you have the base one. So we'll kind of take a look at all those. Enjoy the video, hit the like button if you're brand new, want to find your way back. Double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. So as you can see, I've already maxed the weapon out. I'm going to have some gameplay over on my second channel, kind of explaining that particular method so you can do it as fast as possible. And then we'll go ahead and talk about these individual stats and how the meta build breaks down. Let's go ahead and check out the numbers. So the first thing we got to go ahead and do is figure out the overall bullet velocity. So I went and did my testing like I normally do. You got to go ahead and check the rate of fire. And this is the recoil pattern, as you can see, of the base damage 60 round mag. We'll go ahead and press play so you can kind of see how that goes. And you can see it doesn't really move all that much. It's kind of just a straight up and to the right, which means it's going to be relatively easy to control and be able to manage. You just pull down and to the left. There's no inconsistency, so this is 100% super easy on a controller. If you're on keyboard and mouse, you'll just have to drag that diagonal and kind of build it that way. So I went in through and did my testing that way, did the bullet velocity all about 500 meters from this target, and then just do the math to figure that part out. Then we go ahead and check out the 3.30 mag, which is a high damage, lower rate of fire mag, and we can kind of see how this one goes. It is a little bit more violent in terms of how high it climbs, but you can still see it kind of maintains that same pattern where it's up and then to the right. So that's pretty much what you're going to be able to do. Even though it's still 60 bullets in this scenario, you can see how much further it moves up the door at 12 meters. Obviously, there are some pros and cons to being able to have less recoil and higher damage, but it's always a trade-off. But overall, recoil pattern and how close the bullets are relatively close. So no matter how you build the weapon in terms of which mag you go with, relatively easy to use. We do the same thing with the long range, with the smaller mag, which is only 40. This is faster fire rate, less damage, and you could already see the recoil pattern is relatively easy. It's much tighter, obviously, and that's kind of how that builds out, and you kind of see it on the door exactly at 12 meters. Once we've got all this information, then we plug it into the spreadsheet, and then we figure out all the data based off the damage value. So here's all three builds on this new M40. We got the Clouser, which is the base, the 0.3, which is higher damage, lower fire rate, which is reflected right here with the RPM, and then the Sakura, which is faster fire rate, less damage, which is all reflected through all of these. And I did this damage testing already so that I can combine that and get all that information together. One thing I will point out here is this green area is kind of what's highlighted as the most common TTK you will get. If you get into 10 engagements, probably 8 to 9 engagements will be this TTK. If you get a little bit luckier where you get headshots involved a little bit more than usual, you might kill a little bit faster. Or if you get no headshots or no chest shots, it's going to kill slightly slower. But for the vast majority of your gunfights, you're probably going to go ahead and get this highlighted TTK, which is a little bit different depending on the weapon. But overall, you get a TTK at range, which is not primarily how you're going to use this weapon, since the TTK up close is nothing special. 653 is okay, but when you go up against almost any SMG that sits around 550, 600, you're probably going to get gunned, especially with the slower aim down sight, even if you built it for close range mobility. In terms of long range, we get a 933 TTK, super easy recoil to control, which makes for a good TTK. If you do that, you're going to get this pretty often. If we do the same thing over here, 923, kind of nothing special, especially when we look at comparing against some other low recoil weapons, minus the AK is a little bit more recoil. But in general, the Growl kills at 822. That is the common TTK. So the Growl kills 100 milliseconds faster. The M13 kills about 100 milliseconds faster. The AK, Cold War AK, kills 200 milliseconds faster, but it is a little bit harder to manage, so there's a trade-off. And then we have the STG right around 800, and then the XM4, which is kind of in the middle of the AK and the STG. Overall, I think most people should start to gravitate towards the XM4 or the Cold War AK in terms of meta, and this is kind of a fun gun to use, but overall the 933, 923, and 952 TTKs are nothing special. That being the case, let's go ahead and take a look at some some meta builds and kind of understanding how the attachments work, especially since they made so many changes in the patch notes. So we've kind of gotten to the position where we're getting a little bit more of what we call meta builds. When you want to make a long range option for Vanguard, you're just going to go this attachment, this attachment, this attachment, and kind of what we had in MW and we had in Cold War. And that's just because they've started to balance out the attachments to make that make sense. So when it comes over here to muzzle, you're going to have Mercury Silencer, which hurts your damage range. It still gives you sound suppression, horizontal recoil control, but the MX Silencer will give you vertical and horizontal recoil control. And that's what I was using in those spray patterns where we saw the recoil patterns. It is a little bit slower, but since you're using this at range, the aim down sight isn't so important unless it's like above 600 or you're sniping and you need to be able to aim down sight and not get hit while you're aiming down sight. Which this gun, it's still kind of mid to slow, but it's not going to be like one of those where you're like, oh my God, it's so slow. Then when you go through the different barrels, what you're really looking for range is bullet velocity, recoil control, range. Those are the type of attachments you're looking for. And really the only one that's going to give that to you is this shrouded barrel. We can kind of go through and look through these, and this one's giving you recoil control accuracy, flinch resistance, the idle sway, and then bullet velocity. Which is huge, and that's something I didn't touch much on, but these guns have incredibly high bullet velocity. If you use the 60 round mag, you're going to get 1200 bullet velocity, which is super fast, almost 1400 bullet velocity on the .30 rounds because you're stacking all those, which is up there with the Ram 7, which is kind of like hit scan at times. And then we have the Sakura, which is at under sub 1000, which is close to the AMAX bullet velocity. So you kind of get those trade-offs for what's going to make most sense. You can go whatever optic you want. I know some people go with this particular one here, or the 2.5 or the 3-6. That comes down to your playstyle preference, what platform you're on. Because of the zoom, you might want to go a holographic sight if you're on a console or something like that, or equivalent. So you choose whatever for there. This one for my testing, I kind of went with this one here just because it solves for recoil, flinch, accuracy, aiming stability, all those good things. And then we got tight grip, which is one of the most powerful attachments in the game. Vital could potentially be good, but the way this weapon damages, you would still need to land a couple shots in there to make it make sense. It's not really a point-blank hip-fire build, so gung-ho might not necessarily be worth it. Brace, I believe, is still bugged, so it actually hurts your initial recoil, so I would avoid brace altogether. I still have to test that one to double-check. And then tight grip is the way to go for sustained fire. You're going to have very little recoil. In terms of recoil here, you can go polymer. And if you feel like the gun is manageable, even with some of these attachments, like it's overkill on accuracy, on recoil control, you could always take one of those off for ADS speed and give you a little bit more feeling of mobility there. And then you can really use whatever here. A lot of times you just go fully loaded. I think you got to go with the .30 mainly, even though they're all pretty even in terms of long range. It's just the damage per mag is a little bit higher on this one, even though you're getting the same TTK. So you might as well go for the extra damage per mag. Ammunition, we're still going to go with lengthen. Really not much of a choice for long range. You want as much bullet velocity as possible. But since this thing does have so much bullet velocity, you could go ahead and put something else if you wanted to wallbang stuff a little bit easier. If you wanted to go with frangible to be a little bit weird, hollow point, there's some other options there because the bullet velocity is so high. And then you can really go for whatever here. I normally go with the hand stop, and that's what I was using in the testing. And there's kind of the build for you. Overall, I think it's a very mid-tier weapon. I think it's fun because it's low recoil, but you will get gunned by most guns in the game if the people know how to shoot straight, which most of the guns shoot straight, at least in terms of the meta and the meta builds. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.